This is the second meeting of our stakeholder engagement around the Illinois National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, NEVI for short. Thanks everyone for joining us on this evening, late summer evening. If we can pull the next slide up, some brief housekeeping information. Attendees are in listen-only mode. Please feel free to ask questions during the meeting in the chat pod found in the lower menu of your WebEx screen. We will try to address as many questions as we can. This meeting is being recorded. You should have gotten a little alert. We will make this available on the IDOT website after we conclude the meeting today. All the information in this presentation is draft. Actually, sorry, this is an old point from a previous presentation. So we're going to walk through what's in the draft plan that was posted on the website. But I'll emphasize that this is very much a work in progress. We have not gotten approval of the plan yet from FHWA, so still consider things draft until we get that approval. So thanks for taking time to hear more about the plan, and we're excited you can all join us today. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to do a brief recap for folks who may be new to this topic about what's the NEVI program. We're going to walk through some highlights of the Illinois NEVI plan. We're going to give a brief summary of some of the initial stakeholder feedback we've gotten, and then we're going to talk a little bit about next steps and our plans moving forward. So with that, let's jump into the topics. I should apologize. I should have introduced myself. My name is Elizabeth Irvin. I'm Deputy Director in the Office of Planning and Programming at IDOT, working on sustainability initiatives, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Chris Schmidt.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, Chris Schmidt, the Air Quality Manager in the Bureau of Planning, working with Elizabeth on electric vehicles. So as Elizabeth said, a little bit of background here. This may be old information for folks that were on the first call, but we've gained some new folks that are interested. So I just want to recap that this is dedicated funding that came out of a spending package that got passed last fall called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or as we'll probably mention it as IIJA for short. One of the programs in that package of spending is called NEVI Formula program. So that's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And Formula is a portion of money that's spent or given to each state from the federal government based on population. This is to build a public EV charging, fast charging network, DC fast charging, direct current fast charging network, interconnected network to facilitate data collection and access reliability to alleviate range anxiety in the United States for electric vehicle owners. Illinois will get about $148 million to spend over the next 5 years to achieve this plan. Initial funding under the program is directed to designated alternative fuel corridors, which we'll get into a little bit later, sort of identifying exactly what that is and why those are the important corridors for this spending. Stations have to be every 50 miles in this program and can be no longer than 1 mile off of the interstate at that interchange. So every 50 miles, no more than a mile off of that 50-mile mark. That does not include the on-ramp or exit ramp to that 1 mile requirement. When the national network is fully built out, funding may be used for public roads or other private accessible locations. One thing to keep in mind that these chargers have to be available to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There were some questions that were asked about, hey, can I add this for my fleets and then make it available sometime to the public? These have got to be similar to a gas station that takes credit cards 24 hours a day. These have got to be accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, strictly to the public. Can't be tied to like a private fleet as we know it. Public charging does not mean free charging, of course. There's a lot of electricity that's consumed when charging an electric vehicle, so there's got to be a cost associated with that, and then a fee that I believe they're referring to as being a reasonable return for providing that service. So there will be some regulations tied to that. Fast charging, when we say DC fast charging, that's direct current. there needs to be at least 4 ports at a station to qualify for this funding. They have to be the charging plug type CCS, which is combined charge system plugs. And each one of those plugs has got to be able to charge a vehicle at 150 kilowatts per hour, or kWh. Each plug pulling that amount of electricity at each plug, so 600 total, can be drawn from the same station to be available and eligible for this funding. This means 4 vehicles at the same time charging. So fully charge an average EV in under about a half hour. Sort of a timeline of how we got here. This is a sort of an abbreviated version, but this bill was passed. Just want to keep it in context. This bill was passed last November. So August 1, we had to submit a plan to the federal government. There was some rulemaking that was in there on standards for how that plan should go. That was released a little bit before the August 1st deadline. So we had to really quickly get this plan draft into the federal government comments for notice of proposed rulemaking, which is basically all the requirements that had to be in the plan. That rulemaking didn't even close. Will close 22nd of August. So we hadn't even had finalized rules or comment period on what will potentially be finalized rules before we had to release a plan. So if you followed me at all, I know I kind of jumbled that up a bit. We were writing a plan on a set of standards that hadn't been approved. It hadn't even been through the comment period yet. The deadline for Federal Highway Administration to approve our state plan that it was submitted on August 1st is September 30th. This gives us some time this fall to work on sort of next steps for Illinois as far as how we spend this funding. We are able to begin investing the money once we have an approved plan. Illinois will conduct a lot more stakeholder engagement to refine the procurement strategy that we're looking at. We will also be looking at what the rulemaking minimum standards look like once they get through this comment period, and those standards are adjusted based on the comments the federal government got. So we have all that to kind of look forward to, and we want to take all of this time that we can, because everything was so rushed on the front end of this, to gather the information to figure out where would be the best for these sites, even though there is those fairly strict requirements for how far away from the interstate, where on the interstate they need to be. Another thing we're looking for this fall, we didn't really mention it in that slide previous, but along with the NEVI funding, so that 148 million that Illinois will get, there's going to be another pot of money that's really not NEVI, but it is electric vehicle. It's $2.5 billion in what we're calling discretionary grants. Still looking on guidance on what that would look like. I'm assuming there'll be a proposed rulemaking similar to what we saw with NEVI, or more information and guidance will be given on how municipalities, counties, local units of government will be able to apply for that funding and what that will look like. I think now we're going to be handing it back over to Elizabeth, and she's going to start telling us about highlights in Illinois EV infrastructure development plan.
Thanks, Chris. I just want to emphasize a point that Chris made, which is that we're working to develop this plan and get it in the best shape it could possibly be in to submit to the federal government by the deadline, but it's really a snapshot in time, and we anticipate learning a lot through public engagement and stakeholder engagement. We've already learned a lot. We're continuing to build out that stakeholder engagement and some of the follow-up pieces throughout the fall and into next year. So I want to walk through a little bit of what's in the plan, and then we'll talk a little bit about sort of what some of the things we've learned since we submitted it. So next slide. Just to start with, you know, we're starting this plan from looking at visions and goals, and we really wanted to make sure that this plan aligns with IDOT's overall performance goals, and you'll see them here on this slide. And if you go to the next slide, here's a little bit about how each of these goals are related to EV charging infrastructure. So thinking about the economy, ensuring that the build out of statewide charging network has economic benefits for travelers, for communities, and for workers. Thinking about livability, making sure that EV deployment and EV charging infrastructure deployment improves quality of life, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing air pollution, and that as we're implementing these programs, we're targeting investments in historically disadvantaged rural and underserved communities. Mobility, ensuring that, as Chris mentioned earlier, we have a safe and reliable statewide charging network that allows folks to get across the state and reduces fears around range anxiety. Resilience, making sure that the infrastructure we build today can adapt to technological innovation and increased EV adoption going forward as we work toward meeting the state's goal of a million EVs on the road by 2030. And finally, stewardship, making sure that we're efficiently and effectively leveraging that federal funding. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to talk a little bit about some of our preliminary work on siting locations that's contained in the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. So we had mentioned in an earlier slide that the NEVI funds have to be spent on what's called an alternative fuel corridor, or an alternative fuel corridor that's been designated by the Federal Highway Administration. This program started back in 2016 under another spending package called the FAST Act, which is also sort of your base formula funding for all federal money that we get in the state of Illinois for projects from roads to bridges to transit projects. All of those sort of things come in a spending package. The latest version of that being IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So before that, FAST Act started asking states to identify corridors that had a certain level of assets tied to it, so already existing charging, or it was open to all alternative fuels, so compressed natural gas, liquid propane, hydrogen. And we were asked to identify the amenities on those corridors, why they would be important to designate as a corridor for potential funding in the future. Well, that future funding came in the form of the IIJA. Illinois had already designated several alternative fuel corridors, including the ones you see on your screen, which are strictly in the electric category. So this doesn't show the CNG or propane or hydrogen corridors, although there are quite a few in Illinois that sort of mirror these same interstates. We focused on the interstate system itself, a lot to do with how much freight traffic and how much through traffic we have in the state. We provide a lot of movement for goods in the state. So we wanted to make sure we focused on a lot of the main corridors. In green, as you can read on the legend, those are NEVI eligible because they are either signage pending or signage ready corridors. Signage ready means that they're, in the eyes of the federal government, enough infrastructure along there to be designated as an alternative fuel corridor, so somebody should be able to drive on that and find reasonable levels of charging. That doesn't mean that it meets the NEVI requirements, but it means that it's signage ready by a standard that the feds have set out. Signage pending are corridors that still need to have work on it. Regardless, both of them combined equal where we can spend the NEVI funds. You'll see on here that 88, there's a part of 290, 72, and 24 are not designated currently, but it is in the interest and in the plan that we will talk about in a minute that we build out all the corridors in the state of Illinois to be electric vehicle corridors. So those are in the future planning, but with $148 million, $149 million, and the need for charging throughout the state, we focused on these corridors based on a couple of different things. Vehicle miles traveled, one, and then also where people in the state of Illinois are currently own EVs and anticipated future growth in that space. So one of the exercises that we put in our plan, and maybe you've seen this if you've looked at the NEVI plan, is we put together a very bare bones, very basic idea of, if we look at the requirements I spoke on earlier, the fact that these charges have to be every 50 miles on the corridor, they can't be more than 1 mile off the interstate to qualify. The federal government put together a list, and those are the blue dots that you see on the screen. And those blue dots are current stations that are off of a corridor, less than a mile, and equal 4 ports that can charge at 150 kilowatts per hour for four vehicles at the same time. So the purple stars that you see on your screen would be the minimum locations required for IDOT to build out all of our current alternative fuel corridors to be NEVI compliant. I will stress, this is where you guys come in. This is where the public comes in and looks at what we see here, makes suggestions, alterations. You know, a lot of knowing where these stations should go is going to come from the local communities. We sort of are kind of tied to the idea that they have to be somewhere in this area for this specific program. Now, I mentioned there's $2.5 billion of discretionary funding. So if you're a community, maybe let's say that doesn't find yourself under a purple dot on this map, don't worry. Number one, this doesn't mean this is all the stations that we're going to put in with NEVI funding, but also that because you won't be necessarily close to one of these, maybe potentially is a good thing because you'll have access to charging money or funding to put in chargers in your community, maybe that are more in line with your local planning goals. One instance for sure is we had an I-80 convening for a separate project that we're doing where we're focusing on the I-80 corridor in the Quad Cities. And there was mention of the fact that there really is not a DC fast charger. There's one, and I believe that's Geneseo, the blue dot you see. If you're familiar with that side of Illinois, I grew up on that side of Illinois, but so where 74 comes down on the very left-hand side, upper corner of the state, you'll see a blue dot, but you won't see one in the metro area of the Quad Cities. They have a local need to potentially put chargers right by their transit hub that they've just built. And that is a local potential solution that maybe is not going to come from NEVI funding, but might come from discretionary. Now, the thing to note here is that that location is less than 1 mile off of 74, so it could be a NEVI site. So these are the local conversations that we're having that make this outreach so important, and understanding that, hey, we don't see a purple star in the Quad Cities, but we want to talk about why that is, and you know, is that going to be a benefit to Iowa, our partners? Is it going to be a benefit to the Quad Cities? So these are the conversations that we like to have, and we like to understand what community sort of local needs are. So just to kind of try and put a cap on this, this is a preliminary map. This is drawing on the very basics that are outlined in the proposed rulemaking, and is very much meant to be changed, looked at, and you know, have suggestions thrown at it to see it change for the future. But these are the minimum standards that we put out based on the guidance we received. I think we're going to throw things back over to Elizabeth to talk more about some of the contracting in the plan.
Thanks. And I would just add to that there are a lot of locations on that map. And as Chris mentioned, that's not all the locations. This is sort of to meet the minimum requirements. But we also aren't going to be building all of those in the first year of the program. So an additional piece that we're going to need stakeholder feedback on is prioritizing locations within the years of the program, which leads us into the next slide. So there's a section of the plan that talks a bit about our approach to contracting. IDOT and Illinois, and I think most of the other states around the country, are really understanding that successful implementation of NEVI is going to involve the private sector. That means site hosts, EV charging manufacturers, utilities, and potentially other entities such as municipalities, nonprofits. This is really going to be a cross-sector partnership to make this program successful. As part of that, IDOT is evaluating several contracting strategies and looking at the potential program risks and looking at ways to manage those and ways to maximize the program benefits. So we are looking into those things. We know that for sure, whatever strategy we settle on, we are going to be developing a framework for competitive process to evaluate and select providers and site hosts to install, operate, and maintain charging infrastructure. And that's another piece where we expect we will be getting and seeking feedback from stakeholders to really get a good sense of how to prioritize and how to select really the best partnerships and sites to make this program successful. So next slide, workforce is another big focus of the plan, and ensuring that that EV charging installation, which is a skilled workforce and a growing industry, that we're really making sure that we're building a workforce here in Illinois to do this work. The draft federal guidance, which Chris mentioned before, requires electricians working on EV charging stations to have a certification which is called EVITP, or participating in a registered apprenticeship program. As Chris mentioned, these are draft guidance. We're awaiting the final rule from the federal government, but we intend to follow the requirements set out by the federal governments. And we're working really closely with other state agencies, workforce training providers, labor unions to ensure that we have a well-trained and diverse workforce to install, operate, and maintain EV charging stations. Another piece of the contracting process is going to make sure that we've got workforce provisions such as disadvantaged business enterprise goals built into that contracting process. I want to talk a little bit about Equity and Justice 40. This is a big priority from the federal government, and it's a large section of the plan. The Federal Justice 40 initiative sets a goal of delivering 40% of overall federal investment benefits in climate and clean energy, including sustainable transportation, to disadvantaged communities. There's a map from US DOT, Department of Transportation, which outlines disadvantaged communities. We are using that map as well as some Illinois-specific maps from other programs that prioritize funding for specifically identified disadvantaged communities to identify those communities, but that's really the first step. Making sure that we comply with Justice 40 is going to involve both quantitative work and stakeholder engagement to define benefits to disadvantaged communities. So that's another key area that we expect to do significant stakeholder engagement on and are looking for feedback from folks on making sure that we reach the communities that we're trying to provide benefits to and that they're engaged in meaningful conversation about what those benefits should look like. So I've mentioned a few times about places where I've identified a need for stakeholder engagement. This is a point at which we're actually going to get some in real time, and we've got a poll to set up for you all. So I'm going to pause. Oh, yep, and it's live. So we've got two questions for you. One is just a little bit of information about what your perspective is coming to this conversation. The second question is really about which topics are you interested in participating in future workshops or stakeholder engagement about. And the choices here are the same as are on the slide. So I'm going to walk through them. We've got about 5 minutes to fill out this poll. So feel free to work while I'm talking, but I'll just elaborate a little bit. So prioritizing locations for charging infrastructure. That's back at that map that Chris was talking about with the purple stars on it, identifying where are those locations generally, not specific sites, that we want to make sure we identify as priorities for NEVI funding, and making sure we fill in that map with stakeholder feedback. The second, considerations for evaluating and selecting specific sites, providers, and hosts. This goes to the contracting section. So how are we prioritizing and evaluating proposals as they come in to build and host and maintain charging infrastructure? Third, identifying and quantifying benefits and challenges for disadvantaged communities. That was on that last slide. So really thinking critically about the wide range of potential benefits, not just where chargers are located, but also ensuring workforce participation, ensuring pollution benefits, those types of things. Workforce development, making sure that we are engaging as we think about building out this workforce. And this goes beyond the NEVI program, but is also related to a lot of the work that's going on in the state around ensuring we have a robust and diverse workforce to build this electric future. Program evaluation metrics and key performance indicators for the NEVI program. This is looking a bit longer term and making sure that we're measuring success and back to that being a good steward of state and federal funding in this case, and ensuring that we've got performance measures to track the success of the program. Data collection, making sure that we're we're collecting information about use of chargers and information that some of which is specified by the federal government, but additional data collection that we might want to do. Price transparency and pricing strategies. And then finally, other areas or issues raised by stakeholders. And so you'll see on this poll, there's a section in here, we don't have the capability within WebEx to have a sort of fill in the blank poll option. So if you have another area, we just invite you to add that into the chat pod. So I'm going to pause now. I know some people have a hard time thinking while someone is talking at them. So I'm going to give you another couple of minutes to finish filling out this poll. There's about 40 seconds left. I think there's a few folks who are still either haven't started or are still working. So I encourage you to finish up those thoughts. Just another few seconds. All right.
While we finish that, if I could just
Chris,
mention just really fast, questions in the chat pod, feel free to, we've already got some coming in, but just wanted to emphasize that really fast while we had a second. If you have questions or you had that other that Elizabeth was talking about for those questions, please put that in the chat pod so we can record it. Sorry, thanks.
Great. Thanks, folks, for filling out that poll question. It's going to be really helpful for us as we start thinking through our schedule for the fall and making sure we kind of plan with some sense of what folks are most interested in talking about. So with that, the final section that we wanted to talk through briefly is initial feedback from stakeholders. We submitted the plan on August 1st. As I mentioned before, it's a snapshot in time. We're waiting for approval from the federal government. We have not been revising the plan at all between now and then. It's really in their hands to review and approve. But in the meantime, we've been working to start learning more and start building out the next phases of of initiating this program. So I want to talk through a little bit of what we've heard. And Chris, you're going to have to, there's a bullet animations. I tried to be fancy here. Okay, yes. So one area that we've heard a lot about is additional location suggestions. And we are collecting those. We're going to have information again on the slide in a couple slides about where you can submit additional suggestions of locations. And we're collecting those informations. We're saving them up for when we get a little farther along in site selection and location prioritization. One thing we've heard as sort of a theme in some of those comments is about, looking to have those stations benefit local economies and ensuring that they're, someplace where folks can walk around or get something done or run errands while they're waiting to charge. So that's sort of less about, a part of the state or part of the region, and more about sort of general site selection criteria. Second, this is an area that we've heard a lot about, and I see a couple of comments and questions in the chat about this already. We heard a lot from a range of stakeholders about appropriate strategies for supporting future medium and heavy duty freight electrification. There's a general agreement from a lot of the folks we've heard from that it's really important for the NEVI program to consider opportunities to support medium and heavy duty electrification through things like higher site power availability, availability of higher power chargers, and site design that accommodates trucks and trailers without blocking other charging ports, particularly along routes that have a lot of truck traffic. We also heard some concern that the language in the draft plan, which states that Illinois plans to require every site to accommodate medium and heavy duty vehicles, would significantly limit the number of viable sites and could increase costs that might make charging installation infeasible in some areas. And we really take that feedback seriously. It's always been our intent to make sure that the program is set up for success and adjust the state's approach to the program in response to stakeholder input. And we're really taking that feedback to heart and thinking about a more site or corridor specific approach to medium and heavy duty installation. Some strategies we're thinking about that include strongly encouraging accommodating vehicles and particularly prioritizing infrastructure on freight corridors and where freight electrification provides particular benefits for disadvantaged communities. So that's another key area of feedback we've gotten. We also got a number of comments about licensing and certification requirements for EV charging installation and maintenance, and we are awaiting, as I mentioned, some further guidance from the federal government in the form of the final NEVI rulemaking, and we're working, as I mentioned, with lots of stakeholders and other government agencies to make sure that we've got a diverse and well-trained workforce ready to work on all aspects of EV charging infrastructure. Next bullet point, we got a number of comments on the importance of prioritizing and engaging disadvantaged communities. And we really agree that this should be a priority and is something we're really looking for to work on and focus on going forward. We were welcome if there are organizations that would be interested in partnering with us in engaging disadvantaged communities and planning meaningful engagement. We welcome those conversations as well. We got a number of other comments, including requests for information about the program, a link to the plan, general comments about electric vehicles, questions and comments about other EV programs in Illinois and federally. We've been working to make sure we send those to the right people to consider, and we've been pulling, keeping those comments organized so when we get to the right stages of our process, we have them ready. We can go to the next slide. And I'll just note a summary of this section of the presentation on the stakeholder feedback we've received is on the IDOT Drive Electric website. This is a screenshot of it. You'll see there's a link right at the top of the page to the plan that was submitted. And then if you look below that, there's a summary of initial comments from stakeholders. And we plan to continue providing these periodic summaries of the stakeholder feedback and sort of IDOT's response to that feedback as we move forward in the process. So if we could go to the next slide. Actually, I'm going to turn this over to Chris to kind of close us out.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just pretty much saying a lot of what Elizabeth said. There are a lot of great resources online that make a lot of sense. There's a suggested charging station. A good portion of this data, being that the requirements are so strict, will be sort of generated in general for a lot of different people. I think if you're a local municipality and you're seeing that there's a high high interest for charging stations, but you're not maybe necessarily a NEVI eligible site, I think this sort of shows that your community is ready to have maybe that public match from a local community go towards some federal dollars, if that's a requirement of these discretionary funds to invest in a public station. Again, we don't know what those discretionary funds look like, but everything that we have read about it that's outlined in the actual IIJA bill is that those discretionary funds are meant to go for just about any unit of government that can call themselves that legally. So that's a big benefit. That $2.5 billion, to give you some reference, is about half as much of what all the other states are getting, or is half of what the full federal program is for the formula funds that are going out. So that is a potential interest to us, local units of government, the EPA, who has their own program, to see where the demand might be. So you can go to the website that you see on your screen, or just type in IDOT NEVI. Anymore will pull up our site as probably your first site. It's the Illinois IDOT website, so make sure it says GOV at the end and it's got IDOT in the name. Also, our email address, if you don't already know it, is dot.driveelectric@illinois.gov. Feel free to email us at that. Also, if you fill out the questionnaire that is on our website that Elizabeth talked about, it'll go to that same website to give you some idea of what's going on with that. And then make sure to attend future meetings. A lot of the information that we asked in that second poll question is going to go towards sort of how we prioritize some of these more specialized meetings going forward to gather more of your feedback. And I think we're going to probably rapid fire roundtable kind of some of these questions that we got. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you have one that you've already had time to look at and suggest. I know there's one that specifically calls me out that I can answer if you haven't got one rocked and loaded.
Go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to have to gloat a bit about it. Somebody asked about the local community conversation that Chris was talking about. So that is a very special project that's very intimate to me. Myself and some folks who work on Argonne National Labs applied for the very first funding before IIJA to do a study with all the states, basically from the Nebraska border to New Jersey on I-80. So the multi-state collaboration, one of the first to do so for these fundings, for this funding round and the program as a whole. And we received that funding because we partnered with Argonne National Labs and we partnered with Love's Truck Stop. Love's, you might know, in Illinois, you can sure see them on the interstate. They own another company called Trillium that is a provider that provides their alternative fuel stations at Love's and other locations too. You can wrap it in different branding. Anyway, so that partnership, that collaboration, we received funding from the federal government and we're doing outreach. There'll be another outreach meeting that'll be happening, I believe, around the Naperville area. I'm not really sure if we tackled down a location, but feel free to reach out to the IDOT website and we'll also put up where that meeting is going to be. But we had a meeting earlier this month in Moline, actually it was last month, I'm sorry, time's flying, last month, just talking about I-80 and specifically adoption of electric vehicle and compressed natural gas. So that was that community outreach. I would not be surprised, I'll be very surprised if we don't have maybe a local component to these conversations. And of course, if you're a community that didn't see yourself with a purple dot, or if you're a community that wants to know more about this, email us and we would love to be able to have a conversation, talk about why that is. Most of it's going to center around the very strict requirements that for this NEVI funding that we've spoken about this whole conversation centers around every 50 miles on the designated corridor and no more than a mile off of it. And I saw somebody else ask about level 2 availability. This is only a direct charger, direct current charger, which they classify as a level 3, and that's because it can pull at such a high volume at 150 kilowatts per hour, whereas your level 2 really is sort of like almost like a plug for an electric dryer. It's going to run at 240 volts. Which is considerably less than what these DC fast chargers. So it's really focused on a fast charge, trying to meet gas station kind of timetable, obviously a little bit longer, but not too much longer, and get you back on the road on the interstates to make it available for cross-nation travel. So I rambled.
I would just add to that. So the project that Chris was talking about I-80, it's sort of related to but separate from the NEVI program. And one of the key areas that we want to get, as we mentioned, want to get feedback on is I imagine that we're going to have some specific conversations about site locations, perhaps that being more, breaking out that by regions across the state. we're still working on that plan. But if I would encourage people, and we can go back one slide. I saw a question about going back one slide with the link to suggest a charger location. Encourage folks to do that. Yes, it's IDOT .click/drive electric. And if you look for, if you just type in sort of Google IDOT drive electric, it should also bring you to this page as well.
And then when you scroll halfway down the page, you'll find there's a little map that you click on that'll take you specifically if you're looking for the suggested charging location. It's kind of halfway down that page that Elizabeth was talking about. You'll see a tiny, sort of tiny map, maybe about 1 inch by 2 inches, depending on the size of your monitor. You click on that, and that's where you can suggest that location.
The other thing that I'll mention, we've been really focused on the alternative fuel corridors because that's really the priority for this funding to begin with. The program does say that once the state can certify that it has, or the federal government will actually certify that we've built out our corridors, then the NEVI funding becomes available to use in other locations around the state. So just because your location isn't on one of these fuel corridors, alternative fuel corridors, doesn't mean it couldn't get NEVI funding. It just won't be able to in the first round. We've got 5 years of funding, and who knows whether this program will continue beyond that as well. I'm looking for questions. I think we've covered, there were a few questions about on the medium and heavy duty vehicles. I think we've covered that in the stakeholder feedback summary, but feel free to comment or re-ask your question if you think I haven't covered that yet. Are you considering engaging OEMs with Illinois investments like Rivian and others with experience in installations and companies, charging companies like ChargePoint, Electrify America? That is part of the procurement process. We will have a competitive process. So all of those different kinds of actors, entities will be able to submit proposals to install charging stations. And we're still working through exactly sort of what that procurement process will look like, but we want it to be a competitive playing field for both charging companies, which sometimes you'll hear called EVSEs, and also site hosts. We're going to need places that are going to actually house these charging stations and have them open to the public. So looking forward to look for more information on the procurement process as we go forward on that question.
I just had one in here that I may have been speaking when somebody said, well, I think she was, this person was probably looking at the slides when we were talking about prioritizing the alternative fuel corridors. The question kind of came in, is this mean that IDOT's not going to prioritize rural areas? Isn't that something that's a kind of a requirement within the NEVI program? I just want to say that when we started designating those corridors a long time ago, this is before NEVI came along, it was really strictly try to get those built out as quickly as possible for a lot of different reasons, but mainly to connect for cross-state travel, and the focus was a little bit different than what's outlined in NEVI. And you're 100% right. We're not going to be looking specifically to put these 100% in the most populated locations. You're right that the corridors that you see really get into a lot of rural areas, which is really at the heart of this program, is that we need to put those chargers in areas where somebody right now doesn't want to invest that initial capital, but it's a sort of you build and they will come. If we are to build in those areas, people are going to feel more confident to travel their EV on that area, which brings in local commerce. People stop off, as you know, probably from charging an electric vehicle, it takes a little bit longer than a gas station. They're going to need to walk around, stretch their legs, buy something from a local shop. So it really is kind of an economic driver a little bit too. And we are going to focus, not only because we have to, but it makes sense equity-wise to invest in those kind of smaller communities along the corridors with the requirements the feds have put in.
A related question was, does IDOT have a plan for minority participation in ownership? And I think there are a couple of places where we're thinking about that. One is in the workforce piece of this, where we're actively working with other agencies and with internal folks at IDOT who really focus in this area on ensuring that we set good goals for MBE, DBE participation, and make sure that we're getting the word out that we have, so that we have the that folks know that this is an opportunity. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is on the Justice 40 side of things, which is making sure that we are quantifying benefits to disadvantaged communities and thinking about how do we incorporate that into our evaluation of proposals as part of the procurement strategy, and evaluation of the program as a whole. So I think those are two places where we're thinking about that, and welcome more stakeholder feedback on that as we move forward. I'm looking through the chat to see if there are other questions. We haven't, oh, one was, this is an easy one, which is, will the presentation be available for download? We've been putting videos of recordings of these meetings on that same website, that IDOT Drive Electric website. So they're up on YouTube for folks to listen to at your convenience. If you need a little bit of, if you have insomnia and need a little help getting to sleep, it's there for your enjoyment. And that's where we've also been posting information about upcoming meetings. As Chris mentioned, there's also a survey on our website, and if you fill that out, we'll make sure you get on an email list. So we'll also email you when we have updates and are scheduling future meetings. So that's the best way to stay in touch and stay up to date, and to revisit this presentation if you would like after we end today. Will there be a formula to calculate 97% uptime? I think that is we are expecting some more guidance on that from the federal government, and from the joint office, which is Department of Transportation and Department of Energy. And then we expect that will also be something that, as we get into the nitty-gritty of contracting and procurement, that will be spelled out in those contracts as well. Another question was about IDOT and the tollway coordinating on charger build-out. We have been coordinating. We need to do more of that going forward, to make sure that folks will have consistent access to charging across the whole system. So that we are coordinating, and more details to come on that.
And just to add a small portion of that, because Elizabeth had not really started yet when those conversations started, because they've been going on for a while. We work very closely with the tollways, as you can tell from a lot of the work in Chicago. One thing to keep in mind that maybe isn't as common knowledge if you're not in the transportation world is they're not a direct recipient of federal funds at all. All their projects are done strictly on the funds that they receive for the tolls that they accumulate on their roads. So they don't have as much restrictions, I guess you could say. One of the things with spending federal funds, you got to have a 20% match for most programs. But there's a lot more kind of work that goes along with that. we've talked to the Illinois Tollway, and they don't necessarily at the current time have a need to try and work with that formula to receive those funds. So we wouldn't be able to spend on those corridors. That I don't believe so, nor do they kind of want to receive that. But we are coordinating, as Elizabeth said. There was talk of designating those corridors, which would just be a benefit to continuity in the system for the tollways that have not already been designated. And they actually state mandated to put in chargers at their oases, which they are doing. It's my understanding that the deployment of level 2 chargers at the oases has already started. The contract has been signed. So you'll be seeing those on the tollway. A little bit different that they're level 2 chargers, but that may change as the charging time and all of these different technology pieces become a little more fleshed out, and it becomes more common to see that.
A good question came in about EV charging and accessibility, ADA requirements. We've been waiting for federal guidance on ADA requirements for charging. I think they're relatively recently, the U.S. Access Board published some technical assistance design recommendations for accessible EV charging stations. So that's one source of guidance that was published in late July. So we're still getting our hands around what that looks like, and expect that we'll get some more guidance from the feds on that side as well.
A question not necessarily tied to the plan, but just good informational. Somebody asked, how big is an electric vehicle's battery? How long does it normally take to charge? Things like that. So most cars anymore are probably about a 40 kilowatt per hour battery pack. They go up to 100, and I think they can even now go up to probably larger than that. For reference, they suggested a Nissan Leaf with a 400 kWh battery. Let's say in a Nissan Leaf model, will give you about 168 miles of range. And that's sort of really on the lower end when you look at Tesla and some of the other models that are coming out. It's becoming much greater defined, the potential for a 300, even 400 mile range battery pack, which, as you probably can guess, takes a little bit more time to charge to get to that level. That's why these kind of DC fast chargers are so important for the future.
There's a question about will the grants help with ownership? This is will NEVI funding? It's actually, there's a pretty wide range of activities that are eligible for NEVI funding for reimbursement, including costs related to ownership for those 5 years. The other thing to note, though, is that as most federal programs do, this is it has a local match. It's a 80-20% match. So the federal funding provides 80% of the cost of the project, and there needs to be another 20% coming from other sources. And we anticipate that a lot of that match, in most cases, if not all cases, will come from private sector and the opportunities to make money from the charging side of things. So that's what we anticipate will make up that local match.
We've got about 5 minutes. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm getting some private messages. We've got some good folks in here, adding a lot of good information.
A question about how are high-income locations prioritized when dealing with lower income EV charging dealt with? So I feel free to elaborate on your question. I'm not sure if I understand it, but I think that's definitely something that we need to balance as we're thinking about these stations, in that some locations are going to have a lot of demand for charging based on where there's higher EV adoption. And then there are also places where really it's really important to build the charging infrastructure in order to make it more feasible for folks to be able to own EVs. So that's something that we are thinking about, both as in terms of prioritizing locations and thinking about corridors, as well as when we think about how to make sure that these stations work financially, or that they're financially viable for companies. And so, some of the things we've been thinking about, again, this is all, we haven't developed our procurement strategy yet, but, potentially thinking about, do we bundle some stations together so that some of the higher early utilization stations are bundled with ones that where it's going to be more of a build it and the users will come. So those are some considerations that we're thinking about, and welcome feedback as we move forward. We've got just a couple minutes left, so I want to make sure if anyone has any last burning questions, now is your opportunity.
If I could just real fast, Elizabeth, thank you everybody that came on tonight. I think probably this has been one of the more helpful bits that we've had. We hope you stay engaged. You more than likely, if you registered, well, I know if you registered for the first meeting, you got the invite to the second meeting, and that list continues to grow. So more the merrier. This is supposed to be public outreach. We don't want anybody to be surprised by what we're doing at the state or surprised at the outcomes that come out of this, because we hope that you'll be a participant in those planning efforts. Thank you.
All well said, Chris. I see the last question is on, is data collection and station monitoring part of the program? Yes, that's one piece. There's requirements from the feds about what kinds of data needs to be collected. And there's requirements that the state and private sector recipients provide that data, and also track sort of to make sure that we are achieving the outcomes that we've set out to do. So for things like someone mentioned earlier, the uptime requirement is going to be one example of that. Well, I think with that, I just again want to thank everyone for joining us today, and appreciate your thoughtful participation so far, and feel free to reach out with questions, comments, and other feedback. And we look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you, everyone.